We begin this hour in the Middle East, where the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees has warned that Gaza hospitals may be forced to shut down this night due to acute food shortages. This comes as Israel hits Jenin refugee camp with drones, with at least 3 killed in Israeli raid, bringing the number of Palestinians killed in occupied West Bank to more than 100. Meanwhile, more calls have been made for the release of hostages captured by both sides. Pope Francis, during his weekly address, called for the release of hostages and the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. There is more in this report.
As the Israel-Palestine war continues, children and families in Gaza have been reported to have practically run out of food, water, electricity, medicine, and safe access to hospitals, following days of hostilities and cut to all supply routes. UNICEF staff have continued to respond to the critical needs of children across the Gaza Strip, but access is becoming increasingly difficult and dangerous. Medical supplies and medicines have also been provided to hospitals, but given the number of injuries, hospital beds and essential medicine are quickly running out. Similarly, compassionate volunteers are doing their part to ease the suffering and psychological trauma of children in the Gaza Strip, with many of those innocent young children having been exposed to the brutal realities of war amid the escalating Palestine-Israel conflict. UK Security Minister, while reacting to the war, stated that the British government is heartbroken over the loss of life in Gaza.
We're all heartbroken by what's going on in Gaza, and what we've got to do is find a resolution to it. Now, the resolution is not to allow a terrorist group like Hamas to continually murder Palestinian people and to continually threaten Israelis. The resolution has to be a plan that brings together Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians to be able to live in peace together.
Talking reactions, Turkish Hakan Fidan says the world needs to act to end Israel's war with Gaza, arguing that what Israeli occupation forces are exercising is a collective punishment against all residents of Gaza. In his speech, Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister has called on all parties to stop conflict, which could give rise to an unbearable crisis. He added that every human life was precious. Meanwhile, U.S. Coordinator for Strategic Communications John Kirby, while taking questions at a briefing, revealed the stance of the U.S. and calls for a ceasefire.
That we have and will continue to talk to our Israeli counterparts about the importance of avoiding and minimizing civilian casualties and respecting innocent life and trying to prevent collateral damage as they go after legitimate Hamas targets.
In another development, Israel will refuse visas to United Nations officials. This is according to its ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan. Gilad Erdan made the statement on Wednesday, according to Israeli media, as the fallout from the UN chief's speech at the Security Council the previous day continues.
I have joining me to discuss the Israel-Hamas war and calls for the release of captives, global affairs analyst Collins Owinke. He joins me via Skype from Belgium. Good to have you join us.
Thank you so very much.
So I want to begin with the statement made by the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, where he said that it is important to recognize that Hamas' attack on Israel did not happen in a vacuum, and he said that it had been 56 years of suffocating occupation. Should that kind of statement come from the head of the United Nations?
Oh, yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it should not only come from the head of the United Nations, it happens to be the only sane voice in all of this saga since, it broke out nearly 1 month ago. Now, what the rest of the world, has done, nearly the rest of the world, actually led by the United States, is one way or the other to be encouraging Israel to unleash as much mayhem as possible. Now, they've done that in very, very subtle manner because, after they had done the writing of condemning, Hamas for actually igniting this war, they had actually built some sort of, goodwill on the part of Israel and the people of Israel to now stand on to begin to, get Israel to exercise restraint. But what they did instead was firing Israel on to the point that the carnage is now getting unbearable, in fact, out of control. So yes, the words of the UN Secretary General is the only sane voice so far.
And I want to take you up on that further, that support for Israel. We have seen the French president, Emmanuel Macron, who visited Israel. Joe Biden has visited as the U.S. president. Antony Blinken, who is the Secretary of State, has also visited. We've seen some people from Europe as well visiting. Why have we not seen that level of support or that kind of support for Palestinians on that same level?
Well, that is the one-sided approach that I had, referred to earlier in my opening remarks, because you don't need, as a world leader, to tell Israel, "Come on, go in there and flatten the whole of Gaza and make sure that there is no single Palestinian left alive." You didn't have to do that, but they did that in very, very systematic ways by such symbolic visits, promising heaven on earth and so on and so forth. I mean, look at President Biden's visit. It was a total fiasco because all of the goals that he had in mind when going there, he achieved only but one, which was establishing a humanitarian corridor. But you see, at the end of the day, Precious, what is driving all of these, activities are public opinion on the one hand, but also politics. Politics in the sense that if you look at, the vast majority of, these world leaders that have visited Israel to show support and propping them up, they all have elections looking around the corner. And, they are doing this simply to appease to the electorate. But the good news on the part of justice is that the rest of the world is not having this, because if you look at all the protests that are emanating from different parts of the world, several capitals, and I'm not talking of, Muslim countries. I'm talking of, Christian countries. In Paris over the weekend, they had one next to me here in Brussels, very massive demonstration, and across the world, even in Washington, D.C. So the public opinion is building against Israel for Hamas. Nobody wants carnage. All they are saying is, let both sides accept the solution of, two states, living, side by side each other. That's it's as simple as that.
But how would you, Mr. Wege, how would you respond to those who are saying that, look, that statement coming from the UN chief is justifying terrorism?
They are missing the point. The reason they are missing the point is that, as a matter of fact, you need to look at the lessons of history that the UN Secretary General drew out, which is the fact that, these things are not happening in a vacuum. They're not happening in a vacuum because they've been on. And as a matter of fact, we are dealing with apartheid 2.0. That is what has been happening. And so when this happens, and don't get anybody wrong, nobody is actually saying that Hamas is doing the right thing, but you do not quench fire with fire, because at the end of the day, an eye for an eye means that everyone goes blind. So no, I don't accept that criticism. I believe that under the circumstances, he made the sort of statement that other world leaders should now emulate if they truly mean for the conflict to de-escalate.
And this call by the French president, Emmanuel Macron, that the international coalition against the Islamic State terror group should be expanded to also fight Hamas. How do you think that member states of that coalition will respond?
Obviously, they are not going to respond, with kids' glove. They are going to, respond in the hardest possible manner. And again, that is playing into, a situation that is, already unbearable. I know that critics of the UN Secretary General will say that Emmanuel Macron, on the one hand, is saying something, on the extreme, and the UN Secretary General is saying something on the other extreme. But you see, if you weigh the scale of destruction, it is just, it just doesn't balance up. So I think they have now got to eschew populism and embrace objective proffering of a solution to the conflict. It's as simple as that.
And I want to, let's now go into the possibility of about 200 hostages being released, or more hostages out of the 200 to be released. Qatar has become a key intermediary over the fate of that more than 200 hostages. They are saying that, look, there's a chance that more captives will be released and negotiations are ongoing. How optimistic are you that that could happen? And then why Qatar becoming the key intermediary here compared to other countries like Egypt?
Well, because Qatar has actually said just the right things from the beginning of this war. They have not stood on any side. If you analyze very carefully the statements, coming from, their leaders since all of this, started, you could see a whole lot of balancing in terms of blaming Israel for the wrongs that they have done, and then also, in no uncertain words, condemning Hamas for bringing this upon themselves and upon the people of Palestine. So yes, I think Qatar happens to have built the sort of trust and confidence that no one, no one else actually enjoys at this moment. And so yes, the fact that Qatar is intervening means that yes, there might be hope that more, hostages will be released. But then I believe that in itself is not going to do the job. What is going to do the job is that other world leaders have got to tune down their rhetoric. They've got to show concern for Hamas, and then the terrorists might actually begin to feel that they are not standing all by themselves.
All right, thank you so much for talking to us as always. Always a pleasure. Collins Uweke, Global Affairs Analyst, joining us from Belgium.
Thank you, Precious. Thank you for having me.